Talk guys, welcome to the channel. Without fucking let's go for more news, but first don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. Republican governor sparks MAGA fury with Joe Biden ballot move. Governor Mike DeWine, a Republican from Ohio, has sparked anger among conservatives over his efforts to put President Joe Biden on the state's November ballot. Democrats are scheduled to officially nominate their candidate, presumably Biden, too late to comply with Ohio's ballot access laws, a situation that, while not ideal, has occurred before and has been quietly solved by the state's legislators. In 2024, the issue threatens to cause a partisan clash in the battleground state's GOP-controlled legislature. Thursday, DeWine announced that he was calling for a special session of the Ohio General Assembly to begin on May 28 so legislation could be passed to ensure that both former President Donald Trump and Biden would be on Ohio's ballot in November. He is also calling on lawmakers to pass legislation to prohibit campaign spending by foreign nationals. Ohio is running out of time to get the sitting President of the United States on the ballot this fall. Failing to do so is unacceptable, he wrote in a statement, adding that Ohioans should have the opportunity to cast a vote for either of the major party candidates. As the governor urges Ohio lawmakers to solve the situation quickly and allow Biden to be added to the ballot in November, many Trump supporters are calling him traitorous. I have found it to be good policy to never comment on internet trolls, especially when they are spouting fringe content, Dan Tierney, DeWine's press secretary, told Newsweek. The governor's efforts on this issue have received supportive statements from Senator Vance, Senate candidate Bernie Moreno, the chairman of the Ohio Republican Party, the leadership of the Ohio Senate, our other statewide officeholders, and numerous other Republican leaders across the state. Conservative leaders across Ohio support the governor's goals of making sure all Ohioans can cast a ballot for either of the two major party presidential candidates, as well as banning foreign campaign spending in Ohio elections. Trump uses journalists' detention in Russia as leverage in election. Former President Donald Trump seemingly attempted to use the detainment of a journalist in Russia as a pawn in his 2024 presidential campaign. In a Truth Social post on Thursday, Trump said that Evan Gershkovich, the 32-year-old Wall Street Journal reporter who has been detained since March 2023, would be released almost immediately after the election, but definitely before I assume office. The Republican presidential candidate, who has bashed journalists and news media on countless occasions, continued, he will be home, safe, and with his family. Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, will do that for me, but not for anyone else, and we will be paying nothing. Gershkovich was accused of espionage while on a reporting trip and has been imprisoned for more than a year at a Moscow jail while awaiting trial. Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal and Gershkovich's family deny the espionage accusations. Moreover, President Joe Biden has called Gershkovich's detention wrongful and said he's working on his release. Trump's post prompted a response from T.J. Ducklo, a senior advisor to Biden's campaign for re-election, according to NBC News. Trump has called journalists enemies of the people and pledged to imprison reporters whose coverage he doesn't like, not all that dissimilar to what's happening right now to Evan Gershkovich in Russia, Ducklo said. For Donald Trump, these wrongfully imprisoned Americans are political weapons and props to use for his own gain. For Joe Biden, they are human beings whose loved ones and family members he has spent time with, Ducklo added. Their release remains an urgent priority, just like it was for the 60 Americans who were wrongfully detained or taken hostage that President Biden has already brought home since taking office. Trump and Biden are the presumptive presidential nominees for their respective parties, making way for a 2020 rematch this year. Can Trump still run for president if he is convicted? A jury will soon weigh Donald Trump's fate in the New York hush money trial that could culminate with him becoming the first U.S. president to be convicted of a crime. Meanwhile, he faces 3 other criminal indictments for withholding classified documents in Florida and attempting to overturn the 2020 election in 2 separate cases in Washington, D.C., and Fulton County, Georgia. And that's all while he remains hot on the trail of another stint in the White House. The ex-commander-in-chief, already the first in American history to be impeached twice, is also battling a number of other lawsuits relating to his business practices and personal history. He denies all possible charges and is arguing that, In any case, a president should be granted absolute immunity from prosecution to enable them to execute difficult decisions in the Oval Office without fear of future reprisals, a matter on which the U.S. Supreme Court could soon rule. Despite this blizzard of controversy, conservative voters appear largely persuaded by Mr. Trump's baseless political persecution narrative, which he has gleefully used to fundraise for his campaign. The candidate has insisted he will remain in the race for the presidency whatever the outcome of the criminal cases against him, and, so far, his strategy of delay appears to be working, with no further trials looking likely before Election Day. What are the 4 indictments about? Mr. Trump's troubles began in April 2023, when he became the first ever former or current American president to be hit with criminal charges when a New York City grand jury voted to indict him over an alleged $130,000 hush money payment made to the porn star Stormy Daniels just prior to the 2016 election. He pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in order to hide the payout to Ms. Daniels, allegedly made to suppress her allegation about an extramarital sexual encounter in 2006 that might have cost him valuable support at the polls. His second indictment followed that June, when Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith handed down federal charges against Mr. Trump and his valet, Walt Nauta, with 37 counts related to the unlawful retention of classified documents post-presidency and the obstruction of justice. A second Trump employee, Carlos de Oliveira, was later also caught up in the case, brought about after the FBI raided his private residence, Mar-a-Lago, in search of boxes of classified documents he had declined to return to the National Archives. Mr. Trump's third indictment, again courtesy of Mr. Smith, occurred in August and pertained to the 2020 election and his role in kickstarting the Capitol riot. The former president was then indicted for a 4th time in Georgia later that month, this time charged by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis with 13 counts related to an alleged conspiracy to alter the election result in the swing state in the aftermath of his defeat to Joe Biden. He was charged alongside 18 other defendants, including Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, and Sidney Powell, in an indictment containing a total of 41 counts related to racketeering. Mr. Trump has further been found liable for the sexual abuse and defamation of magazine columnist E. Jean Carroll and for fraud over the Trump Organization's systematic inflation of the value of its assets to secure favorable terms from lenders, which yielded a $464 million judgment against him earlier this year. So can he still run for president? There are no explicit restrictions in the U.S. Constitution to prevent anyone under indictment or convicted of a crime, or even currently serving prison time, for that matter, from running for or winning the presidency. That said, a clause contained within the 14th Amendment was enough to convince the Colorado Supreme Court and Maine's Secretary of State that Mr. Trump should be removed from ballot papers over his part in inciting the events of January 6. However, the former president was able to successfully appeal both of those decisions, and the matter ended up in the conservative-majority Supreme Court. There, the justices ignored the question of whether or not he had engaged in an insurrection, but determined unanimously that only Congress could disqualify a candidate for federal office. Thanks to the success of Mr. Trump's delaying tactics, none of the other indictments brought against him currently have a trial date set in stone, with Judge Tanya Chutkan in D.C. and Judge Aileen Cannon in Florida withdrawing the dates they had originally set, so the Manhattan hush money trial could be his last court engagement before November 5. But even if the tectonic plates were to suddenly shift and one of the trials did come to pass in speedy fashion and secure a miraculous conviction, Mr. Trump would still be free to run the entirety of his campaign from a prison cell. What is far less clear is what would happen if he were to win. And you, viewer? What did you think of the Trump situation? Leave your opinion in the comments.